Now, from faulty foreclosures to bogus mortgage documents, the fallout from the mortgage meltdown is sure to be on the minds of voters as they head to the polls on Tuesday. My next guest has chronicled what he calls a sales culture spun just right out of control. We're joined now by Michael Hudson. He is the author of The Monster: How a Gang of Predatory Lenders Fleeced America and Spawned a Global Crisis. Michael writes for the nonprofit Center for Public Integrity and previously worked as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Michael, good to have you with us on Bloomberg.
Thanks for having me, Pimm.
Why did you write The Monster? I mean, there are a lot of books about the mortgage crisis. What made you want to write a book?
You know, it's true. There's been a lot of ink spilled on this subject, and there's been a lot of good reporting. But I felt like a lot of the tone was sometimes this was a natural disaster that just something that just sort of happened, like a forest fire, and then
like the weather, like it was not controlled by human events.
Right, and then the Fed and the titans of finance were scrambling, to put out the fire, but. The truth was that some of these folks may have had something to do with lighting the fire. So, and also, the other sort of cliche was this sort of inappropriate risk. My reporting showed me that fraud was a big driving force in a lot of this. Some of the most telling evidence came from the internal gatekeepers, risk managers, mortgage fraud investigators, loan underwriters. I talked to a lot of these folks, read a lot of their testimony, and the story they told was consistent. They did their jobs, they found fraud, they raised red flags, and instead of being rewarded or promoted, they were ignored, marginalized, harassed, demoted, or fired. So that to me was...
So there was no incentive for good behavior, it was just incentive for bad behavior.
Exactly. One of the loan officers at AmeriQuest, which was the largest subprime lender in the country, told me, he said, all the people who were doing, the people who weren't doing the bad things were getting fired. The people who were doing the bad things were the ones who were making the money and getting the promotions.
Well, one of the people doing these things, according to your book, Travis Paulus from AmeriQuest, is one of the characters in this book. And describe Travis Paulus and what he did in this whole complex mortgage world.
Right. I talked to Travis, had a lot of conversations with him. He was very forthcoming. He'd had a religious had a religious conversion, and felt very differently about the world now than he did then, and so wanted to talk and I think in many ways set things straight. But before, years ago, he said, I wasn't a very good person. I drank, I took drugs, I just did whatever I wanted to. But I had bad personal ethics, but I had pretty good business ethics in that I did whatever my employer wanted me to do. So when he worked at American General at another loan company before he came to AmeriQuest, they wanted him to vet the loans. They wanted him to make sure the borrowers could afford the loans, cross the T's, dot the I's, and he did that. But when he went to AmeriQuest, he found a place that encouraged, condoned, and in many cases richly rewarded his sort of baser instincts. So he became someone who did whatever it takes, and he was a branch manager and district manager, regional manager, and eventually VP. And he harangued, pushed, yelled at the people below him to basically lie and cheat to book loans, because that was what it was all about, was more loan volume. If you set a record one month at AmeriQuest, that was your floor the next month. Tell me what you've done for me lately, and you had to beat that, and then you had to beat the next floor, and on, and it was all about exponential growth.
One of the other things that came away in the book is that whiteout is still being used. I didn't know that people still used whiteout, at least in the quantity that it seems to have been used in this industry.
Right.
Explain that.
Well, what the folks at AmeriQuest told me is there's some important tools you needed to work there. You needed X-Acto knives, you needed whiteout, you needed Scotch tape, and they would use this equipment to outfit the break room or spare cubicle, and basically turn it into a little fraud workshop. Sometimes they would joke they'd call it the lab or the art department, and it was there you would do like cut and paste documents. You would take W-2s, take a W-2 from a borrower who's making good money, and if you have a borrower who's not making enough money, you paste his name on that, you run the cut and paste through it, Xerox, and presto, you've got a loan document that makes a bad loan prospect look good.
I was going to say, and presto, there's your mortgage mess.
Right.
All right. I want to thank you very much, Michael Hudson, the author of The Monster: How a Gang of Predatory Lenders and Wall Street Bankers Fleeced America and Spawned a Global Crisis. A wonderful book.